And today I am joined by Steve Boone from Checkmarx, who is the Director of Product Marketing, and Paul Harland, who is the Solutions Engineer from Equixly. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Steve, who will introduce Checkmarx before handing over to Paul to talk a little bit more about Equixly.
Awesome. Hey, thank you guys so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak and talk a little bit about the great partnership that we have working between Equixly and Checkmarx. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit for the topics we're going to discuss today, I wanted to kind of think about a little bit about the world we live in and kind of the world that we've built AppSec for, right? And when we think about all of the great things that we've accomplished over the last 10 years in AppSec, we've really been striving for things like centralized applications and human written code, clear security gates, kind of the norms, the things that we live in and the things that we understand extremely well. Where world used to be, as I put it, quite predictable, right? We understood our day-to-days, we understood our responsibilities from within the organizations, from developers to AppSec engineers and everybody in between, of how code was produced, how it was delivered through our pipelines, and ultimately how it made it into our customers' hands. Obviously, with everything that's going on, whether it be AI, whether it be newer technologies, whether it be just all of the new attacks and attack vectors that are surfacing, we're in a much different world these days. Now, first and foremost, applications aren't centralized nearly anymore, right? We were mostly building on the cloud for the cloud with API-first applications that are largely and widely distributed. If we think about it, can't go anywhere without hearing about AI. And the fact is that that's had a huge disruption on the way that organizations are developing code and releasing their applications, right? We have to think about both security for AI and AI for security. So making sure that the code that we're bringing in and constantly changing is also safe for us to consume. The business logic era, the level that we have within the APIs is critical to how we look at security, the data that's being passed back and forth to make sure that our organizations are safe and our customers are safe as well. And then I think the thing that's really standing out now more than ever is this idea of continuous validation and how much we have to have it throughout our workflows. So, previously we might look at validating at certain points within our pipeline or maybe certain points within our release process. But now that's completely evolved, and we'll talk a little bit about why and the ways that we can address this going forward. So what is needed today within our application security and software development life cycles is, one, we want to make sure we can help developers stay in their flow, right? And this means we don't want to require them to have to do a bunch of context switching. We want them to be able to stay where they are in their IDEs, in their AI-powered assistants, whether that's Claude, whether that's Cursor or Windsurf. Right? All that information that we're able to give them, whether it's coming from a platform, whether it's coming from our scan results, should come right back to those developers where it can be something that's not only informative, but also probably more important, actionable. And for CISOs, obviously, at the end of the day, we want to reduce exposure, right? We want to make sure that we can see the full picture across our entire SDLC. I often think of application security much like a patchwork blanket, right? There's many different pieces that support our application footprint, from infrastructure to our containers to our APIs. All of that needs to be accounted for, and we need to bring that into one place. And then the last two are really being about, one, focusing on balance, it's what I call speed and trust, and then also the focusing on our real risk. So when we think about a speed and trust, specifically, security fits into workflows without slowing them down, right? That's what we're talking about. How can we make sure that we're moving security as fast as code is being built and delivered today? And that means we need to move at the speed of AI, right? And then also, lastly, there's a lot of noise, right? When you think about all the solutions that are out there, most organizations have at least dozens, if not more, of different tools that they're integrating together. How do we make sure, if developers only have 10, 15, 20 minutes a day to actually focus on remediation, that they're focusing on the things that actually bring real risk and that are actually going to reduce our exposure overall? So the good news is there's a lot of things that we've already done, right? If we look across kind of more modern AppSec organizations today, companies already have great foundations in place. They've been focusing on, we talked about shift left for ages and trying to figure out how we could get scanning closer to the developer so that we could find vulnerabilities closer to development and not have to worry about finding them in production. We focused on IDE native developer feedback and surfacing vulnerabilities, again, right in front of the developer. Most organizations now have adopted some form of policy-driven governance, right? So as we're creating code, as we're promoting our applications through our environments, we've got the right checks and balances in place to know when we should pull a lever and stop the tracks. And what I think of as ASPM or unified vulnerability management, but having one centralized location that's able to take and aggregate all of those vulnerabilities into one place and make them actionable for us. So when we think about what great AppSec looks like, right? We talked about some of the things that organizations are doing well today, but if you want to take it to the next step and you really want to focus on doing it above bar, then we have to think about a couple of things, right? And I think about one, how deep can we go? Right? We need to be able to make sure that we're able to source risk across all of those different moving pieces and parts. Again, that's our APIs. That can be our dependencies. We need to think about runtime. We need to think about static code. We need to think about both SAST and DAST. All of those have to come together so that we're able to go deep and wide across the application footprint. We talked about the need for continuous validation, right? The same thing. Every single time that we're moving code, every single time that we're moving into our environments, when we're running our builds, do we have to run a full scan every time? No, of course that might not be ideal, but we should be doing something. We should at least be making sure that the delta changes that we're introducing are not bringing new risk, especially when we're working with AI. Third, I'm going to talk about validation, right? How do we know that the risk that we're actually working on or that's being surfaced matters? How do I know that it is reachable? How do I know that it's exploitable? How do I know that it's attackable? Are these things we should really be spending time on? Next, the idea of, is it developer ready, right? Are these findings that we're bringing to developers, do they come with actionable fixes, or is this something that they're going to have to largely research on their own, right? Ideally, go ahead and bring these folks in here. Apologies about that. Ideally, we don't want to require developers to have to context switch, right? They're going to want to be able to come in and stay in their workflow, be productive. And at the end of the day, we want to give them all of the information they need so they can feel confident about rolling up their sleeves and saying, hey, I see a problem. I know what to do to fix it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm not going to have to wait for AppSec or other folks in the organization to come tell me it's an issue or tell me how to fix it. See a problem and I can take care of it myself. And then lastly, it really comes around the idea of compliance, right? We need to have unified results. We need one system of record that's going to allow for our auditors and our stakeholders to really get and understand what the total picture looks like. And so that's what we've been focusing on at Checkmarx. If you're not familiar with our organization or our company, we are the creators of Checkmarx One. It's one of the industry's largest and trusted AppSec platforms, and really based on kind of four key pillars. At the bottom, I always say that the kind of foundation of our success has been our core engines, which focus around static analysis, security testing, SCA, malicious packages, software supply chain security, container security, all of those core engines that you'd want to have to make sure that you've got that full application footprint. And these days, we're also focused on bringing to market our agentic AI agents, specifically around Developer Assist, which focuses on finding vulnerabilities real time as AI is generating code, and then our Triage and Remediation Assist, which work at the pull request level to analyze findings and understand if they actually are true, validated, or if they're false positives, and then again, providing that remediation suggestions back to both developers and the AppSec teams. And as we mentioned, right, having a way to correlate all of this information. Today, we're going to look at how not only Checkmarx can surface these results, but how we can also pull in the data from Equixly to have that unified results platform where you can understand the risk of all the different findings that you're going to see. And largely, we've been very successful with this. Today, we've got over 1,000 customers on Checkmarx One. We're scanning over 900 billion lines of code monthly, which is just amazing. And we're doing over 4 million customer scans as well. So if the question is, hey, will this work for me? Will it work for our large enterprises? Can it handle it, millions of lines of code at a time? Absolutely, right? We encourage you to check it out. Many of the major analysts, have praised us for the success that we've been able to do. We've been a Gartner leader now 7 times in a row. We were in the Forrester Wave leader in 2025, and we're really excited the IDC for including us in their ASPM report last year as well. So what does all of this look like? What does this mean for our partnership? What are the things that we need to do now with these two solutions coming together? And so I want to talk a little bit about the idea of continuous offensive validation, because I believe this is where the story really starts to shine, right? A lot of the things I talked about, most organizations have. You probably have today within your organization SAST, SCA, probably maybe some API tools as well, right? The key is while those are all very important, they're not enough on their own because application environment is constantly changing, right? So on the left, what we're seeing here are actually what is changing, right? We know that APIs are no longer static, right? They're evolving with every release, every new endpoint, every integration, and everyday workflow change, right? So as those APIs are changing, it's important to understand that business logic gets exposed in new ways. It's not always a simple vulnerability like an injection flaw or a misconfiguration. Sometimes the risk comes from how a workflow behaves, how permissions are enforced, or how different services might even interact with each other. And the thing to understand is attackers know this, right? They're taking advantage of it. They don't just test one endpoint in isolation. They will chain those interactions across APIs, across services, users, and business processes, right? That is where a lot of the real world exploitability comes from. And so the challenge is that periodic testing, it can't keep up with that pace. A test may be accurate when it's run, but it becomes stale as soon as the deployment happens, right? So on the right side, we're talking about why does that actually matter, right? Well, traditional scanners are very good at finding symptoms. They can tell you where something looks risky. However, they often don't prove the actual exploitation path. And so manual penetration testing can prove something is exploitable, but it isn't continuous, obviously, right? And it cannot realistically cover and keep up with the pace that development is moving today. It just won't scale. So business logic flaws are especially difficult. They're often evade static rules and basic fuzzing, and they require much more offensive attacker-like approach because that understands behavior, sequence, and context, right? And that's important. So developers don't only need a list of potential issues. At the end of the day, what we need is evidence that's going to show them whether something can actually be abused and how it can be abused and why that matters. And so all that said, where does that leave us, right? Well, it leaves us with an operating model mismatch. Traditional testing was built around checkpoints, right? You'd run a pen test, you'd review the individual endpoints, maybe you produce a report, and then you hand that findings over to your development team. The model assumes that security can happen as a separate phase. And I think that's the fundamental shift that we're seeing today, right? This new AI-driven era, development doesn't work that way. Everything's changing constantly, especially if you're in an organization that's adopting AI-generated code, right? These workflows can span multiple different services, and risk often happens in the interaction between the steps, not just in a single endpoint, right? So the issue is that, not that necessarily I think the traditional testing is bad, it's that it's designed for a slower, more linear development process. Today's modern API security, it needs to fit the way that our teams are actually building, closer to the release cycle, closer to developer workflows, and more importantly, focused on validating how real API interactions can be abused. So real quickly, kind of summarize here and bring this forward. I think there are 4 things today that we can say are absolutely true, right? 1, AppSec teams need to understand that they own the risk, right? No matter what's changing, what tools we're bringing in, every API surfaced, it all falls back to AppSec. We need to make sure that we can be responsible for those. 2, developers need direction, right? They're focused on build, they're focused on moving fast. How can we support them in this new era to, again, give them confidence, show them that they can fix these things on themselves and that they have the right tools. We know developers aren't security experts, but we do know also that we can supply them with the right information at the right time to make them capable. Last, CISOs need proof, right? Not just coverage. Well, we want to be able to show them that the things that we have are measurable, right? That we're actually making a difference. Many organizations are investing in AI. They're investing in many different security solutions to help protect them. And so they want to be able to see that ROI at the end of the day, that we are productively moving the needle to a better place. And the last, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's around compliance. I mean, at the end of the day, all of us have to report to some sort of compliance. There's always auditors that want to be and see and ask questions. So the easier we can make that to consume, the more likely we're going to be out the door quickly without any problems. So that's why I'm excited today to really talk to you guys about the partnership between Checkmarx and Equixly. In my perspective, it's about connecting two things that security teams need together, right? Checkmarx is providing organizations that enterprise AppSec foundation. We're providing visibility across the application environment and really driving deeper developer workflows. Equixly, on the other hand, is adding the other piece of that for us, right? It's the offensive validation layer for APIs. It's the continuous API penetration testing. It's the agentic attack simulation. And also business logic, right? Together, this creates a stronger, much stronger end-to-end model. So we're not just helping teams find what is vulnerable, we're helping them prove what is exploitable. And once the risk is validated, we're helping them focus on the remediation efforts on what actually matters, right? So together, we're helping customers move from detection to proof, from proof to prioritization, and from prioritization to faster, more directed remediation. So with that, I want to hand it over and let you guys hear a little bit about Equixly and all the great things that they're doing, and then provide a little show and tell for you guys as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Steve. And look, you talk in the same language as us.
That's good.
Pen tests have always been the ultimate prioritization tool, but they're often late, and by the time you get the results, then your APIs have moved on, your apps have moved on, and what can you do then? You need another test. So
100%.
What we're trying to do at Equixly, or what we're doing at Equixly, is bring in the pen test for the AppSec team who own the API, who own the security around it as well. And we're doing with that with our continuous agentic AI hacking platform. Now, some of the themes we've talked about today already, but just to go, I guess, further into them, it's really about the importance of APIs as we go forward. So we're seeing that APIs, as well as becoming bigger, becoming more connected, and owning the business logic now of how businesses communicate, we can only see that going more and more in the future as well. I can think about a case where perhaps businesses won't be writing or building their own front end and will just be exposing their APIs for a customer's personal AI tool, whether in business or for themselves, to build an ethereal UI just to do a certain task. So we've always got to think about what's going to be the future for APIs. And at the moment, they're very important, they're growing, and I think that will only become more important as we go forward. Now, traditional pen tests have helped us. We've been able to scan, we've been able to meet certain frameworks that we have to adhere to. And that happened a lot easier in the past when we had release cycles, which were quarterly, which were every half. And in between those tests, as we were ready getting our documentation, putting things on staging, we could get ourselves a pen test, get the results back, and then decide what to do after it. Should we roll back the release? Should we fix some of the vulnerabilities? Or should we just update the documentation to say there's probably a problem here? All three were particularly valid back then, but we're not in that world anymore. We're releasing software multiple times a day. As Steve mentioned, these are going into different microservices, versioned separately across all of your cloud environments and talking to each other across these interfaces. I think we've also got to face another reality as well, and that is the evolution of the attackers. So attackers in the past, there had to be script kiddies, they'd start, as they were called. They'd join an online community. They'd receive their first few tools. They'd go through years of training, trying to do smaller tracks, trying to get more sophisticated. And really they'd need that wartime, that kind of practice in order to get good at their craft, to join the leagues of the big hackers, let's say. But now we're seeing human attackers don't have to go through that step. They're now either AI assisted, or they're managing multiple AI hackers themselves. multiple of these hackers are doing very sophisticated attacks. So the attack sophistication has shifted. The speed of exploitation, they're constantly looking at endpoints. Has that endpoint changed? Has it updated? Should I try a new hack? Should I retry the old hacks on this one? So the speed of finding a vulnerability once it's been sent live is a lot faster as well. So that means the number of vulnerabilities that are being found by either white hat hackers or black hat hackers is going up. And also the scale of attack. Once a new vulnerability is found, it can be a matter of minutes until that's scaled out to every known endpoint and every known S3 bucket, for instance, in the world. And that means that we've got to really start thinking in terms of attacking ourselves and securing our defenses before we go live. So again, we're just talking here about the same thing, really, that scale and the skill has really gone up. But also the regulators are catching up with this. Oh, blimey. I don't know why I'm going fast, but the regulators are catching up on this one as well. If we look at DORA, NIST, the CRA and PCI, they're now mentioning this word, continuous. So they're seeing that continuous scanning, other than point in time scanning, is going to be important going forward. So if you do want to adhere to these frameworks, you're obviously going to have to start thinking about how to implement continuous scanning within your pipelines, or at least within your software release lifecycle. So this is what Equixly is here to do. What we want to do is allow you to automate your scanning of your applications, your APIs and your applications. We want that to happen within your build process, your CI/CD, on a schedule, anything that fits within how you're currently build software first. And that means you're getting exploit validated vulnerabilities directly to your teams through the Equixly interface, or now through the Checkmarx interface as well, where you can pull all of those results together, and I can give you a view of that later. And really what we want to be doing is giving that human level pen test, but without the scale of a human. In other words, a human will take 10 times longer to pen test 2,000 API endpoints as it would for 200. A machine, not so much. We just horizontally scale, and we can do it in a reasonable time, perhaps a little bit slower, but still a lot faster. It removes that one-to-one scaling in terms of risk, in terms of size of API and effort expelled. So our approach, which I'm going to show you shortly, goes through really 3 stages. Because the most important thing, as Steve was mentioning before, is actually understanding what we are scanning. So the first thing we do is build up a context, an understanding of the application or the API that we're scanning. And now that we're using LLMs, we can actually understand things like human level. So the first thing we do is explore. This can be either us building an understanding from known documentation, OpenAPI files, Swagger files. This can be us automatically crawling your web applications to find all the API interaction points. And from this, we understand things like names in any language. So we can understand your endpoint names. We can understand the types of parameters and the names of the parameters that are passed in and out in order to understand how to actually use the API as a customer or a hacker would, and then more importantly, make the connections between all of the endpoints. What we do then is a series of HTTP requests, responses that are looked at by the LLM, which are given specific training instructions to try and do certain hacks. And then they'll decide on the next request that goes out in order to try and find vulnerabilities throughout your whole API. What that means is you have a full auditable set of requests and responses that were carried out during the test, and you get a list of vulnerabilities that we found during that test as well. As I said, delivered into the user interface or directly into the Checkmarx interface as well. And then what we do is help the developers remediate those problems. There's 2 ways we do that. We give a plain English understanding or write-up of the problem, the endpoints where the problem was found, the specific object or function that caused the problem, and how to remediate it. Added to that, we also give you the endpoint interactions. These are fantastic because it's got a built-in repeater. You can see the actual request and response, headers and bodies, so that you can understand exactly what was happening in order to replicate either an integration test, a unit test, so that you know you don't get that problem again. Okay, let me show you the platform then. So imagine, if you will, you are logging into Equixly, looking at your set of applications. An application to us is a collection of services. So if you have a single monolithic application and API, that would just be one service. Whereas if you had a more distributed application with lots of definitions and lots of APIs, we could collect them all together and say, hey, this is a project to us. So what we'd do, we'd click on one project to understand its risk level, its open issues, the most common issues. Here you'll see in the services, we've just got one defined for this project. It's implemented by a Swagger file, and we can see it's got 37 endpoints. So what I do, I go and click scan or exploit, and then we start exploiting that API. As I mentioned before, what you get is a full list of every request and response that happened during this. When our LLM sends out that first request and gets back the response, they decide what to do next. They're given tasks to do based off what we call extensions. So it's trying to do something. It's not just thinking, oh, what should I do next? It knows what type of vulnerability, and it's got the context of the application and the context of the current conversation, and tries to actually do things, in this case, like a bowler. So here you can see we can even filter down to the profiles. So who are we using this API as? An anonymous user, user 1 or user 2. And as we're using user 1 and user 2, that's how we're finding things like bowlers. So if we go in the issues here, you'll see we've found lots of different types. So broken object level authorizations, 2 types, a horizontal and a weak resource. Clear text submission of passwords, and indirect object reference. There's lots of vulnerabilities that we find, but let me just show you, if we go into one, the kind of things that we're doing to help developers. So there's 8 individual bowlers found here. If I go into one of those, there is that clear written text about the problem, the reason why this is a problem, and what we actually did to find that problem within the code. The most exciting bit for me is always the endpoint interactions. This shows you exactly what we did to prove. So this here is your validated proof that this is a real vulnerability. First request, we log in as user 1. We go to a category, subject category ID 1, and we get back some information. We then log in as another user. Now remember, our LLM already knows the token from the previous, and it knows that that belongs to them. So once we've logged in, our LLM will go, yeah, go and try to find that same category for that user. And there we've proved that they've been able to get an object belonging to user 1 with user 2's token. Now that just looks like four steps, nice and easy. But if you imagine actually what's going on in the background, there could be 100 different nodes leading off from each item here. So we'll be trying that bowler against thousands of endpoints. One of them happens to be vulnerable, but actually what we're doing in the back is scaling that attack to try every single possible combination. And that's really the power here, that we can do that within less than an hour, or even smaller, even quicker for some smaller applications within your CI/CD. So let me now switch to the project that we've got integrated with Checkmarx. We've got the Equixly bookstore. It's been scanned by Checkmarx and it's been scanned by Equixly. If I go into the risk management now, so what you can see is Checkmarx has scanned for the secrets and it's done a scan of the code as well. But you've also got imported results from the Equixly platform, which then are ordered by that risk score, and you can go and assign those to developers to fix. You can go inside each individual vulnerability and then look at that even more, or you can then link directly back to Equixly to go and look at that full details as well. So the workflow there is really helping you look in that ASPM mode. What are the total vulnerabilities for that application? How can I then go and address and resolve that problem within my code? Thank you.
So yeah, we've got a couple of questions. If anyone on the webinar would like to add any, please just chuck those into the chat now. The The first one is, does the integration require any changes to the existing CI/CD pipelines, or does it slot directly into DevSecOps workflows as it is? Who'd like to take that one?
So I could take that one. So really, the DevOps, the CI/CD pipeline is there to kick off the scans, right? I want to scan now. I want to scan now. This integration would piggyback off those. So when Equixly is told to scan in CI/CD, it would also trigger then pushing the results to Checkmarx and say, hey, here's a new set of results. You've got more, hopefully less, to find now from Equixly, and you can go and view that in that single pane of glass.
Perfect. Thank you. Next one is, what does the setup and onboarding process look like for any of us that are already using Checkmarx 1? How long does it take to see results from Equixly in the platform?
So I've done the setup. I'm not sure if you have, Steve. So it's literally a 10-minute setup. If you've already got, obviously you'd need an Equixly account, but given that you have both accounts, it's an easy connection setup, deciding which project you want to connect and push results. And then on next scan, the results will be there within minutes.
Perfect.
Also, we can help you set it up. So just give us a shout.
Absolutely. Next one is, how does the integration prioritize which APIs to test first, particularly if my company has a large amount of endpoints?
I guess the integration is not the thing deciding what's most important to you, right? So the integration's there to do what you tell it. So upon deciding your most important projects, that's where to focus first, and perhaps do the scan on those first, and then move to the lesser projects. Now, what you want to be thinking about is which are already in Checkmarx, of course, and then from that you'll know it perhaps even assign revenue to certain applications, and then decide based off your risk profile what you should be scanning first. The integration is just there to assist your business decisions around that.
Yeah, I think that reflects a lot of kind of our guidance that we give to customers all the time around, what applications should we be scanning most frequently, most often, right? I mean, you really do want to look at those core business applications, which are the ones, and within your organization, you'll be able to identify them really quick, right? Those are the ones we're all getting on fire drill calls for regularly anyway. So, but when it comes to being able to pull all of that information together, those calls are going to be a lot more effective now, right? So even when you're going in to get in those fire call drills and you have to run around and understand, what the latest challenges are, the fact that you can have all that information in one place is super, super helpful.
Perfect.
And I think this one's probably for you, Steve. How does this integrate with the existing Checkmarx SAST engine? Can scans be initiated from Checkmarx schedule scans?
Yeah, so we can trigger scans, both ways if we need to. I don't think today we've got the direct integration with our DAST engine, but it's absolutely something that we want to explore. There's actually a lot of really cool stuff. We'll have actually another webinar coming up on DAST here in the next quarter from Checkmarx. So I encourage you guys to look for that, and you'll get to see all the latest new offerings coming with our DAST engine.
Yeah, thank you again to Paul and Steve for presenting today, and thank you all for joining us. I think this collaboration is really exciting for the AppSec space, and if you are Checkmarx customer or Equixly looking to go either way, please get in touch with us. We'd happily go into a far more deeper dive demo for you guys. But yeah, with that, we will close off the webinar. Thank you all for joining us. See you again soon, hopefully.
Thanks all. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.